Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I trust that you've had a very productive track sessions this afternoon. Our session now begins with a keynote titled Intelligent Mistakes in Test Automation. And our speaker is a well-known personality in the global software testing industry, and this test automation guru is the recipient of the 1999 European Excellence Award in Software Testing. And is the first person to receive the International Software Testing Qualifications Board Excellence Award in 2012. She has co-authored 4 books on software testing and test automation. And today she'll be sharing with us the pitfalls and problems that can be avoided in test automation. Please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, we have Ms. Dorothy Graham.
Thanks very much, and I'd like to say thank you very much to Mastura and the conference organizers for inviting me to come back to Malaysia again. I'm talking about test automation. Now, what I mean by test automation is what most people mean by it, which is the automation of executing the tests. That's what most people mean when they say test automation. I'm not talking about test-driven design or unit-level testing, mainly system-level test automation. I was very interested to hear Gualtieri's statistics this morning about the number of people that don't have any automation yet being 28%. I thought that's really interesting. I mean, I've done surveys of people who are in automation over a number of years. I used to do a show of hands survey at conferences, and back in the late 90s, early 2000s, 80 to 90% of people did have tool support for testing. Now, that may have included things like debugging tools. So it's surprising, really, that there are still so many people who aren't doing test automation. I did a survey on SurveyMonkey in 2014, and in that survey, about 20% of people had no automation. So I would have thought automation would be everywhere by now, but it isn't, and people are still struggling with automation. And one of the reasons people are struggling with automation is I think they're making a lot of mistakes. So I'm going to talk today about I'm calling them intelligent mistakes. Now, that sounds a bit odd, doesn't it? Does that sound like an oxymoron? Well, what do I mean by an intelligent mistake? Well, if something is intelligent, if something is a mistake, it means that you're doing something wrong, right? You've done something that resulting from defective judgment or insufficient knowledge or a misconception or a misunderstanding. And something which is intelligent is exercising good judgment. So in a sense, that's the opposite of a mistake. So I reckon an intelligent mistake is an action that's based on some kind of a faulty premise, so it's got at the heart of it, it's got some good idea, which seemed good at the time. Sometimes say this seemed a good idea at the time, but it actually doesn't work very well. And I'm going to talk about 5 of them today. And the first one is that automation should find lots of bugs. A lot of people think this is what automation does. And of course, it seems like a sensible idea at first because, we're automating tests and tests find bugs, and automation is going to be better. It's going to be certainly faster. So therefore, we should find more bugs and find them quicker, right? Doesn't that sound sensible? Yes, it does. However, there are some problems here. What are we actually automating, and what does the automation actually give us? What type of testing is it that finds the most bugs? Given the choice between regression testing and exploratory testing, which finds more bugs? This is not a trick question, by the way. Anybody? Exploratory. Absolutely, exploratory. Exploratory testing is really good at finding bugs. Regression testing is running tests that have been run before, and last time they ran, they passed. So how likely are they to find a new bug now? It's interesting if they do, but it's not very likely. So it's exploratory testing which is really good at finding bugs. But what do most people automate? Well, you can't automate exploratory testing because that's a mental activity, but it's regression testing that's most often automated. So expecting the automation of tests that don't find many bugs to find more bugs, when they're automated, they're more consistent, so they're less likely to go wrong in ways that you hadn't intended. So they're much less likely to find bugs. So this is one of these intelligent mistakes, which seemed like a good idea at the time. In fact, it's not automation that finds bugs anyway. It's tests that find bugs. It's not the automation. Automation is just simply a way of executing a test, a way of running a test. Any given test, an individual test, if it's going to find a bug, it will find it if you run that test using a tool or if you run that test manually. So the bug finding ability of one single test isn't affected, at least not very much, by whether it's automated or not. So finding lots of bugs can actually be a dangerous objective for automation, especially if you're automating regression testing. Now, the book on experiences of test automation, which was published in 2012, one of the people there actually counted how many bugs were found by different types of testing. So 100% distributed between 4 boxes, 25% each. Nah, well, I'll give you a hint. The fixed verification was 8.4%. So roughly 30% for the other 3. Not far off for the manual scripted testing, that was 24%. And then what, half and half for automated tests and exploratory testing? No, exploratory testing found nearly 60%. So if you're good at math, you'll have figured out by now that the automated tests found less than 10% of the tests. In fact, that was it, 9.3%. Now, I went to one conference, one of the conferences in the States, and at dinner time, I sat down next to a guy who turned out to be a high-level manager, and I asked him about the testing they were doing and whether they had automation. He said, oh, yes, I've got this automation team, and they've been writing lots of tests, and they've been spending a lot of time, and they're running things every weekend and every night and stuff like that. But I'm thinking of knocking it on the head. I'm thinking of closing it down. Why? It sounds like they're doing some good with this automation. Yes, but it's not finding many bugs. That's not the point. The running tests automatically is a way of gaining efficiency, not effectiveness. That's the difference between the two. If you think of your manual testing, well, that's really slow. Okay, so let's automate that. Then we'll have fast testing. But if you think only of that, you're making a mistake, because it's the quality of the tests that actually gives you the effectiveness of the testing. If you have poor quality slow testing, and you automate poor quality slow testing, you're going to have poor quality faster testing. If your testing is in chaos, automating chaos just gives you faster chaos. What you want to have is good quality testing. Most people start off perhaps down here. That's the worst place to be, and often they go across and try to automate what they already have without thinking about the quality of the tests that they already have. That's not a good idea. You're far better off by improving your testing first. Forget about automation and just look at the quality of the tests. Once you've got a good set of tests, then decide which ones of those you should automate and which you shouldn't, and then you'll go over to the other side, which is the best place to be. So don't just automate for the sake of automating. Think about the quality of the testing. That will actually give you more benefit, and more benefit to the business. Because the business wants to have, yes, it wants efficiency, but it's more important that you have good quality testing so that you get the value of testing being delivered. So that's the first one. The second one, automation comes out of a box. Well, they used to come out of boxes, didn't they? Nowadays it's a download. But what is it that comes out of a box? It seems like a good idea, right? These tools, some of them, the commercial tools, are quite expensive, and obviously automation gives lots of benefit, because we've seen lots of stories of people having benefit from automation. And if we spend a lot on the tool, that will guarantee success, right? I hope you think no, because it doesn't. All we need to do is to get the right tool. I wish I had £1 for every time someone asked me, what's the best tool? There are some problems here. For a start, there are technical issues, because what comes out of the box is not automation. It's just something you can use to build automation. And there are also management issues involved here. Now, automation needs to fit your organization. The way you do testing, you should organize your tests, whether they're manual or automated, in a way that is best for you. And that needs thinking about. You need to design how your tests are going to be organized. In fact, you need to have a testware architecture. And if you don't think about that, if you have a poor testware architecture for your automated tests, you will end up with high maintenance of those tests. How many people here have suffered from having too high maintenance on the automated tests? It's a common problem. A lot of people say, we automated, but then we ended up spending more time maintaining the test, and in the end we gave up. A lot of people actually abandon automation because of the maintenance cost. It's the most frequent cause of automation being abandoned. So there are two layers of abstraction which are critical for good automation. So if we have our testers up here and we have our test execution tool down here, if you just give the tool to the testers and say, here you are, get on with it, then anything in between that is what your testware architecture is, but it is in fact empty. What you need to think about is how are you going to structure that testware? And there are two layers of abstraction which are critical. Nearest the tool, it's very important to use good programming practices in order to design the automated tests in a way which are going to be easy to maintain, in a way which is modular, a single thing in each script, lots of scripts, not one script per test. The scripts are calling other scripts and so on. Good programming practices, by the way, is one of the patterns in the Test Automation Patterns Wiki that Saretta and I are working on. And by the way, if you came to the tutorial yesterday, you will recognize some of the slides I'm using today as well. So having structured scripts there, making sure you're using, because working directly with the tool, the scripting languages are programming languages. So you need to have development skills if you're working directly with the tool. And you need to do good development. So if you do that, then your automation, if it's well designed, will be able to survive more than one release of your software and more than one release of your tool. You may end up wanting to run the same tests on more than one environment, or perhaps in more than one browser, something like that. If you design the tests to be portable and independent from the tool as far as possible, that's how you get long-lived automation. Then the other level, at the top level, is who do you want to write automated tests? If you enable the automated tests to be run using high-level keywords, a domain-specific test language, that means that anyone, even people from a business background, will be able to come and write the tests that can then be run automatically without needing anyone to do anything specifically to implement a given test. If you do that, you can have many people using the automation, and your automation will be of much more benefit to the company because it will be much more widely used. If you don't think about this and you just do whatever the tool tells you to do, yes, it'll work for a while, but you will be tied to that tool, in fact, to that version of that tool. And it will change. No matter how much you think the tool you've got now is perfect, it probably won't be perfect in 2 years' time because things are changing. And you want to enable your testware, your automated testware, to be able to cope with the changes that will come along. By the way, there's a good book on test automation, and in chapter 5, we talk about the testware architecture. I'm a bit biased about this book. So it's not really about the tool. When someone says, what's the best tool, what I usually say to them is, what's the best car? Okay, so supposing you've just been given some kind of a prize, and money is no object, you can have any car you want. So close your eyes and picture, what car would you have if you can have any, no, money's no object. Any car you want to have, you can have. Would it be something like this, do you think? For some of you, maybe. My son-in-law is a really keen, who's a software tester, by the way, which is great. He's a classic car buff. So for him, maybe this would be the car he'd like to have if he could have any car. But if you've got, say, 4 children and 2 dogs, neither of those is going to work very well for you, and something more like this will be the best car. So what's the best car? It depends. It depends on what your needs are. So what's the best tool? It depends. It depends on what your needs are. It depends on things like your budget. So you have a certain amount of money to spend, and you also have some benefits that you hope to achieve. Now, it might be that you don't get many benefits, but you didn't spend much, so, well, I suppose that's okay. Or maybe you don't get many benefits and you did spend a lot. That's not where anybody wants to end up. Or maybe you spent a lot, but you did get good benefits. Or maybe you got really good benefits and you didn't spend a lot. Where would you rather be? Now, there's a sort of a misconception that if you go for commercial tools, you're up here. Yes, it costs a lot, but you're going to get good benefits. And there's also a sort of a feeling that if you go for open source tools, yeah, it doesn't cost a lot, but of course you get what you pay for, and it doesn't give you good benefits. Now, neither of those are necessarily true, because I've seen situations where people have bought commercial tools and paid a lot, but they didn't get good benefits. And I've also seen many examples of people who are using open source tools, and they have really good benefits. So that's not the key. That's not the differentiator. What is key is that you put the effort in to build good automation. You think about your testware architecture. And if you do that, I mean, that does take some effort. So rather than low cost, perhaps we'll say moderate cost. But if you do that, then you do get the benefits. And you get benefits either from the open source tools, both of them benefit by putting the investment into designing good automation. And it takes time and effort to succeed. It's not automatic. One of the other things that came up in the survey that we did, we asked people what their problems were in test automation, and 57% said lack of support. And of those who said lack of support was their main problem, 54% of them said managers expect a silver bullet. And those who said lack of resources was a problem, 63% had insufficient time planned for the automation. It does take time and effort. Management support is critical. I mean, you can do a certain amount of things just on your own, playing around, but if you want to have test automation which is going to benefit their whole company and the business of the company, then management support is needed. When we wrote the book on test automation experiences, that came across time and time again. The companies that were most successful had the best support from management. The high-level managers need to understand what automation can do for them, but they also need to understand the limitations, and they need to understand that there is a cost involved and have realistic expectations. It's a learning process. You will make mistakes. And it's important also to consider the people issues, because people are using the tools, and you need to make sure that things are working well for the people. And that's something which is often overlooked. So don't make your testware tool-shaped, but make your tool or your framework U-shaped. You design how you want your test to be, and then adapt it to however the tool wants to use it. There's a difference also between automated tests and automated testing. At the church that I go to, we got a new dishwasher recently. Now, a dishwasher is an automated solution to washing the dishes, right? So you put them in the tray and you put it in the dishwasher and it's done automatically in only a couple of minutes. And that's true. However, our automated solution has several manual factors that have to be done before you can use the automated solution. First of all, you have to turn it on at least 20 minutes before you want to use it, so there's a time gap. And then you have to make sure that the plug that goes in the bottom is in just right, because if it's not screwed in tight enough, nothing will work. So then, and after you've finished with the dishwasher, you have to drain it. Well, you'd think you'd press a button and it would drain the water away. No, you have to hold the button in until the water drains away. That's another manual process. What's that got to do with test execution? Well, a lot of times people take the tool, which is doing test execution and comparison, and they say, right, well, there we are, we've got our manual processes, and in the middle of our manual processes, we have some automation. So we're going to set up our environment. For each test case, we're going to set up the prerequisites. Now we've got our automation, and then we're sort of logging results, analyzing failures, reporting defects, and looping around there, and then clearing up afterwards, and so on. Now, excuse me, but that's some automation embedded in manual processes. That's automated tests, but if you want really good benefits from automation, you need to do automated testing. And this means automating the things all around the execution of the test itself. So it's automation should be more than automation, if that makes any sense to you. Automation is more than just executing the tests. And then you're going to get the benefits. Okay, the next one. We're going to automate. What should we automate? Oh, I know. Let's automate all of our manual tests. Sounds like a good idea. We already have lots of tests, so I'm sure those would be good to be automated. And automation, of course, will be much quicker, so we can be completely automated then. We'll have all our tests are automated. Oh, I guess we won't need any manual testers anymore then, will we? Ooh. There are some problems with this, like what tests are you actually automating, and what are you missing by only automating your manual tests? I found it interesting in Gualtieri's talk this morning. One of the questions asked on the ISTQB survey, I don't think was the best question that could have been asked, if you'll excuse me saying so. It was asking, what percentage of your tests are automated? Well, what does that actually mean? I don't think that tells you it's not really a good measure of how you're automating. Because have you automated the best 20% of tests? The easiest 20% of tests? The most useless 20% of tests? Someone who's automated 2% of their tests might be doing really great automation. On the other hand, if someone's automated 100% of their tests, I think they're in serious danger of a disaster. So I can tell you a story about that. A company I went into at one point had a geographical information system. They were very proud of their automation. Nothing went out the door without going through their set of automated tests. And then one day, one of their customers said, hang on a minute, I'm sure this isn't right. There's a bug. Oh no, a bug. How could there be a bug? We have automated testing, they said. And when they went and examined their expected results, their golden version, ooh, there's the bug. Their automation had made sure nothing went out the door unless this bug was in it for 3 years. So it was a bug preservation system. So let's automate all of our tests. Well, here's our manual tests, and we're going to automate them. So here's our automated tests. So we have some tests that we've automated already so far, and we have some tests over here that we haven't automated yet. Should we be trying to automate all of them? No. There are tests in that space that should not be automated. Examples, Sreta talked yesterday about CAPTCHA, when you have to type in and prove I'm not a robot and type in these wavy letters. That's to prove that you're not a machine. So can you test that automatically? Can you get your computer to prove it's not a computer? Well, if you can, then it's broken, right? Your CAPTCHA doesn't work. Now, I know there are ways to test it, but and what about, do the users really use the system this way? You have to have real users to watch to see that. Are these colors nice together? Well, no tool is going to have an opinion about colors, right? So there are many aspects. Oh, and another thing, again, one of the contributors to the book, Simon Mills, had a guy there who was really keen on automation. And there was one test he was determined to automate. He spent a day, no, not close, another day, a week. And it still wasn't really working right. So he spent another week, 10 days, trying to get a particular test automated. And it still wasn't quite right, but it was better than it was. Now, this test, if it had been run manually, would take half an hour and was only needed once a quarter. So he had spent 10 days. How many quarters of manual testing was that? It's not worth it. There are tests that are difficult to automate and are not worth automating. So there are some tests here that you should not automate. Well, that's one side of it, but the other side is also important. If you automate only what you are currently doing manually, you're missing a trick, or several, because there are things you can do with the tools that are difficult or impossible to do manually. If you're testing manually, you see what's on the screen. You say, oh yeah, that looks about right. But do you know the state of all the GUI objects? No. But if you're testing with a computer, the test automation tools, you might well be able to check things that you don't see manually that will give you more information about whether the software is working correctly. So there are additional things you can do, particularly verification, with automated testing that you don't do manually. There are also different types and new types of testing that can be done using the tools, again, that are impossible to do manually. generating random inputs and having just a partial oracle. Monkey testing. John Foda wrote a great chapter in the Experiences book about monkey testing. So there are things you can do with automation. Oh, another thing, going back to the percentage of tests automated, if you have 100 manual tests and you decide to keep, say, 20 of them as manual tests, and you're going to cover what the other 80 covered with automation, and you end up with 2,000 automated tests. Okay, so you're testing what you would have done. You're probably testing a lot more than you would have done. But what percentage of tests have you automated? Is it 20% or is it 1%? So beware of what you're counting in terms of automation. Now, one of the things, of course, that if people think the automation is going to replace the testers, this is a point of view, sadly, beloved of many managers. And we can reduce the number of testers once we have the tool, right? Well, I'd like to ask you, Mr. Manager, who thinks he can replace the testers, what are your testers actually like? What do they do? Do they sit down and follow a really precise, detailed script and never deviate to the left nor to the right and never put their brains in gear and always do exactly what it says on the paper even though they know it's wrong? In that case, I think your testers are mindless morons. And maybe some of that activity can be automated. But if your testers are people who sit down, who want to test the system, they may have a script or a charter or something like that, and they are testing, but as they are testing, their brains are in gear. As they are testing, they're thinking, oh, that's interesting. I think I'm going to do this later on and make a note. As they're testing, they're thinking, I know the expected result says this, but I'm sure that's wrong. As they're testing, they're thinking, oh, what if this? What if that? I wonder. No testing tool ever says to itself, I wonder. So in that case, you have intelligent investigators as your testers. That kind of tester is never replaced by a tool. So if you have 100% automated testing, you have something with zero intelligence in charge of your testing. In fact, you need more skills, not fewer skills, if you're going to do automation, because you need to have people who understand the automation. You need to have your testware architects, your testware designers, and so on, who have programming skills, in addition to people who are testers. What the automation can do is to free the testers from the boring stuff, which they don't like to do and which is not exciting to do, so that they can do more exploratory testing. If you do that, your testers will become more effective. They'll probably also become a lot happier, and they'll be able to find more bugs. That's how automation can help support the testers in order to find more bugs. But it's not the automation that found the bugs. It's the fact that the automation enabled the testers to do more testing. And the more testing is what found the bugs. So tools do not replace testers. They only support them. And they're very good at supporting them. People versus tools, what do people do? Well, they think, they evaluate, they assess, they have critical facilities, they make decisions, they are very good at recognizing patterns, and they have new ideas, they're good at finding bugs. They also make mistakes, by the way. Sometimes when you make a mistake, it finds something really interesting in the system. Have you noticed that? If you did the test wrong, oh, actually, hey, this is good. So what do the tools do? Well, the testing tools don't do testing. The testing tools just run stuff. They run whatever they've been told. This is really important. I'm going to say it again. The testing tools don't do testing. They just run stuff. They run whatever they've been programmed to run. Give them bad tests, they will happily run bad tests. Give them good tests, they will run good tests. The tool doesn't know the difference. The tool just does what it's told. It's software, right? Its intelligence level is absolute zero. So get the tools to do what computers do best, and get people, the testers, to do what people do best. Use the tools to support the testers. Okay. Return on investment. I used to be really keen on getting people to say what their return on investment was from test automation. When we were writing the book, I pressed everyone who contributed to say what the return on investment was. But I've sort of gone off the idea a bit now, partly because when the chapters for the book came in, I realized that even the ones that didn't specify the return on investment were still doing good automation. But of course, this seems like a very sensible idea. You have to have return on investment for automation. It's absolutely critical. We'll be spending time and lots of money on tools. We want to know that the money is being spent in a worthwhile way. Well, that is sensible, isn't it? That is something which is, you want to know you're spending your money wisely. And of course, a watertight business case will convince the managers to invest in automation. And a lot of times, people can't go ahead with automation unless they have a business case. However, there are some problems, because return on investment is certainly not the whole story. And a lot of times, we like to think we are logical beings, right? And if you put a logical case forward, of course, that will convince people. And then they will make the right decision, because I convinced them. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work like that. People are emotional beings. People usually make decisions on emotional factors, not rational factors. And if you don't understand that, you may wonder, why didn't they do what they should have done? What I knew was right. So it's very important to understand that. But also, calculating ROI can be difficult. Now, one of the things I like to do, and I did this yesterday in the tutorial as well, is ask people, do you have good return on investment from your automation? Anyone here say, how many people here are doing test automation in some form or another? No one? Come on, put your hand up. How many people are doing something with test automation? Okay, there's a few. Do you get good return on investment? I mean, if you don't get a good return from what you've done, you probably shouldn't be doing it. So in a sense, it is important that you get a good return on investment. But I like to ask people whether this question, and the sort of answers I normally get go along this line. The tests are run more often. That's interesting. The tests take less time to run. One of the guys in the tutorial yesterday, they could do 1 month's worth of testing in 3 days. That's great. It takes less human effort to run the tests. We can test or cover more of the system. And we can run the equivalent of days or weeks of testing in a few hours, and it's faster time to market. Is this good return on investment, do you think? Looks good, doesn't it? I've got some good news and some bad news. The good news is these are great. These are great benefits, but that's what they are. It's not return on investment. The bad news is that's not it. So they are good benefits, but return on investment is actually an equation. Benefit minus cost over cost, often expressed as a percentage. If you get a 10% return on investment, it means you've got 10% more benefit than it cost you. That's considered good. One of the chapters in the book got 900% return on investment from their test automation. That's spectacular. But when you're talking to high-level managers and you say, we've got return on investment, they're expecting a number. They're not expecting benefits. So how important is return on investment? Actually, one of the things is, if you want to calculate that, you have to find, well, the cost of automation. Yeah, you can probably figure out what the cost is. You might have tools that you buy, you look at the time that you spend, and you can convert people's time into money with some kind of a loaded salary cost. So cost isn't that difficult to calculate. But what about benefit? Tests are run more often. What's that worth in money? I don't know. I don't know how to calculate that. Tests take less time to run. What's that worth in money? I don't know. It takes less human effort. Aha! Human effort we can quantify. So ROI is most often expressed in terms just of human effort. And that's partly what gives the impression that the tools replace the people. That's why it's dangerous. So cover more of the system. Again, hard to quantify. Faster time to market. You might have a marketing department that can give you a figure for what that's worth. By all means, use it. So how important is it? It can be dangerous and may give the impression that people are replaced by tools. I have blogged about that. I like this quote from Yoram Mizrachi. Automation is an enabler for success, not a cost reduction tool. We no longer have to justify why we do testing. Years ago, when I started in this industry, people wanted a return on investment equation for why we should do testing. Now people seem to understand that testing is necessary, but they're asking for return on investment for automation. But if your company isn't going to survive without automation, it's a bit pointless calculating it. It's wasted effort. And how many companies in the future, with the Internet of Things coming along, are going to be able to survive without automation? So, and many people do achieve real success without measuring ROI. That was the lesson that came from the book. The important thing, though, is to show benefits. You need to make people aware of the benefits of automation, or they will forget. You need to keep reminding them. I did put together a spreadsheet for showing return on investment. If you do need to do that, I'm happy to email that to you. But showing the benefit of automation is important to do. And this is just an example. And then the last intelligent mistake is testing tools are testers' tools. Sounds sensible, doesn't it? Testers do testing, and testing tools help with testing, so therefore tools will make better testers because they'll be able to run more tests and faster. So it's a no-brainer, right? Testing tools are for testers. In a way, it's a shame that we were called testing tools, to be honest. Better to have called them test support tools. But the tools are software packages using programmer languages. Tester skills are different to development skills. If you're going to be working with the tools directly, you need to have these development skills. Also, if you're spending time on the tools, and a lot of people when they start automation, if you want to get involved with the automation as a tester, it can be quite fun. But often people get so taken into the tool world and the development world, they forget about testing. And if you're trying to develop automation, you're not testing, are you? You're developing automation. So is it the tester's job to automate tests? You need the programming skills. Now, some testers do want to become programmers. They do want, and I know there's a lot of discussion nowadays saying testers, somebody at one of the conferences said, testers, if you want a job in the future, you have to learn to program. Well, I don't agree with that. I think there are a lot of testers out there who are really good at testing, who don't want to be developers, who wouldn't be very good developers even if they tried. And it's a terrible mistake to push them into doing something they don't want to do and wouldn't be good at. One person I talked to recently said their managing director had heard this, all testers have to become developers to use these automated tools. So the edict went out and they lost half of their testing team within a couple of months. The best testers, of course, and the ones who didn't want to automate. So not all testers want to become developers. Hans Buwalde says if you force your testers to become developers, you may lose a good tester and gain a poor programmer. So I don't agree with that. Now what about automators? Do automators need to be able to test? Well, it's certainly helpful, but I don't think it's as necessary. As testers knowing how to test, and the automators need to know how to develop, how to use the tools. It seems that there's a new mistake being made out there. It used to be people are saying, well, testers have to become the developers, and that's a mistake for all of them. But now people are saying, oh, the automators, they can do the testing. Well, hang on a minute, do they have testing skills? And if not, we're then pushing ourselves back into testing without people knowing how to do testing, and that's not going to be a good thing. Now, if a tester is also the automator, that can lead to a conflict of interest. Supposing you are both, and some people, I mean, especially in an agile team, it's very good if people are both testers and automators. And I have nothing against people who want to be both. I just don't think every tester should be forced to become an automator. But if you are both a tester and an automator, okay, well, you come into work and you think, I'm both a tester and an automator. What shall I do today? I know, I'll be a tester. So you go over and you run about 12 tests, and at the end of the day, you look back and you say, I did a good job today. I did 12 tests, I found some really interesting bugs, and I've covered significant functions and features, and I did a good job as a tester. Oh, but I didn't automate anything. So the next day you come and you say, okay, automation hat on today, and you automate 4 tests. And at the end of the day, you say, I did a good job today. I automated 4 tests. These tests are automated really well. They're well structured. They're calling lots of other scripts. Anything where I found duplication, I pulled it out and made it a separate script. They're robust. They will survive unexpected events happening when they're running. They're really good automated tests. Oh, but I only did 4. Okay. Now, your manager comes along, and the manager is worried about the fact that you've got a certain number of tests that have to get done before you can release the product. How many tests did you do today? I automated 4. How many tests did you do yesterday? I ran 12 manually. Oh, well, automation is really important, so you carry on doing 4 a day, and we'll just put the deadline back. Yeah? I don't think so. So the problem is, even though the automation is better long-term, deadline pressure pushes you back into manual testing if you're trying to do both jobs. And that can be a problem. And what tends to happen then, because of the fact that the automation didn't sort of take off, automation obviously isn't very good, right? Well, it didn't have a chance. But that's one of the reasons why you need the management support. You need to invest in what's important for your business, and if automation is the way forward, high-level managers need to understand that. Okay, so why are these intelligent mistakes? Because there's a gem of something in them which seems very sensible, and it's very easy to say, oh yeah, that seems logical. However, these are intelligent mistakes. Automation should find bugs? No, tests find bugs. Automation is just a way of running tests. Automation comes out of the box or a download? No, it takes time and effort to structure good automation. You need to have a good testware architecture if you're going to succeed long term. Should you automate all manual tests? No. There are tests that shouldn't be automated, but you should also be aware of things you can do with the tools that you can't do manually. What about ROI? Sometimes you need to do it, but sometimes it can be dangerous because it implies that the tools replace the people. And the testing tools, the skills needed for using the testing tools directly are actually software development skills. Not all testers want to have those or should have them. So we've looked at some of these intelligent mistakes. I don't know whether you've seen them in your organizations or if you've perhaps heard people having these misconceptions, but I hope I've given you some ammunition to help disillusion people who have these ideas about intelligent mistakes and avoid them. And I have some information, including there's 4 books that I think are really good, but of course I'm a little biased about those as well. And thank you very much.